It's Wednesday, October 12th, 2005, and I am en route to Boise to have a back surgeon assess my condition. And I've stopped on the way at Craters of the Moon National Park, or Monument, outside of Arco, Idaho. I've been here before when I was a teacher, I remember. It is a fascinating place, a huge area. The Oregon Trail travelers learned to circumvent this area, of course, because although it looks quite nice and passable right here, all around us are areas that are just totally covered with broken lava fields. This is a shield kind of lava that just oozes out and then spreads across the landscape. Kind of like I think the lava flows in Hawaii. We're now going down to Devil's Orchard. "2,000 years ago, a nearby volcano erupted, and in its explosive eruption threw massive chunks of its volcanic wall into these areas. Now, I'm not sure that it threw it or that they migrated down with the lava. I think it was a combination of both. There's nobody here today that I've seen. And the sun's come out after a rainy night, apparently. It's a lovely day. Peaceful in its rugged and bizarre topography. And what looks again like you could drive or walk a horse through here easily, and you could, when you get to what you see over there, that little wall, major parts of this area for probably 10 or 20 or 30 miles or more are just like that. And they're crevice after crevice after crevice of that flowed, hardened rock. And pretty jagged rock too, as lava can be, as you can see here from these pieces up close. This gives a better idea of the ruggedness and impassability, if you will, of this major portion of this volcanic shield area. And over there you see what looks like might have been part of a cave formation. Caves were formed by the lava flowing, and it hardened on the outside while the inside remained molten and continued to flow, and that created tubes or straw like caves, if you will. The one in Shoshone, Idaho, had ice in it for decades. I don't know if it still does. The miners in the old days, maybe 100 some odd years ago, used to get ice from there and take it down in the wagons to Shoshone, which at that time was a major railroad center here in the West, I think a dispersal point. And that was one of the few cities in the West that had cold beer. It's so nice to be here when there's nobody here. It's the finest context you can view nature in, and that's when there's no human beings nearby. It's just dead quiet except for my voice. How fascinating it would be to know or to read the reminiscences of a early or first white man to go through here and account or recount his perceptions of this country he saw. These ragged, jagged rocks, and yet smooth and obviously flowing like the taffy his mother might have made when he was a boy. And yet with his perhaps limited knowledge of geology and so forth, how could he have known? How could he have related to this? That's what would be interesting. This is kind of interesting. Notice how solid the lava chunk to the right looks, and yet how rugged and lichened and battered and weathered the chunk to the left looks. Perhaps it's just that this is broken off at some point in time. But we can see the whirls and flows of the lava and of different compositions apparently of the lava in order to create these differentiations in color. Much of the philosophy stated in the interpretive signs here that I've seen so far is the discussion of man's polluting impact on this land. That the lichens that are in some instances so colorful and bright nevertheless show evidence of degrading because of air pollutants that sweep in from the outside area, from outside the park. I wonder if those brown hills there are in fact the remains of volcanoes, because you can see that those are weathered lava smoothly eroding out over that surface, or whether it was just the lava flowed and created mounds, and those are just weathering mounds. I'm stopping to video these rocks in here because there's such interesting formations and colorings and so forth. Things that's enticing about this area is the potential campsites. This little spot right here, We're not next to us interpretive trail sidewalk. It's got a nice slope to it. You could camp with your head right in that little V there and your body hanging downhill, surrounded by this rugged rock, and all around you these rugged visuals of stone and dead trees and branches, and the desert, somewhat stark desert plant life. That interpretive sign there is quite honest, quite frank. It explains that many of the trees, limber pines, are dead, lying on the ground because prior park managers believed that the dwarf mistletoe, which causes these strange, grotesque warpings of the branches of the limber tree, were killing those trees, and that in order to somehow save the trees, they cut down trees, apparently to try to kill the to kill the dwarf mistletoe. The irony of it is that these two plants have lived symbiotically in this area for several thousand years probably. They're extremely hardy survivors, and that was the natural process, and that it cautions all generations and managers not to judge things by their current standards of good and bad, but rather to understand the role that these things play in this environment. And if it is their natural role, leave them alone. There's a big difference between this situation and the situation of exotic grasses that are brought in from Europe in the old days that now clutter and despoil the western ranch lands. When I look at a pile of rubbled volcanic rock here, apparently conforming to no natural cause, it looks more like a backhoe had pushed all these things up, piled them on top of each other, and then any dirt and so forth had eroded away during subsequent rains. But I don't know why this is like this. There isn't the gradual erosion and exposure of rocks on a hillside that you normally expect. Here comes a school bus, so the tranquility will not be long. Hopefully the benefit to them will be great and long. This is one of the main craters. Now looking pretty much west. Back to the crater again. The main crater is down in here. There is a secondary crater beyond that dipping ridge, if you will. And that down there, that black white line, was the height of a lava pool that apparently I don't know, I guess it drained back down or something. I don't know, it doesn't explain what happens to it, but that's an interesting question. And there are other vents in here. You can see looks like animal trails over there. Here we're looking down inside of a spatter cone. And a spatter cone's kind of like a little bit less aggressive and exciting from a cinder cone, and it kind of blows out blobs of stuff and seeps lava at the same time. In fact, if you look at this curving here, you can kind of see the sense of how it might have been flowing out into our left here, which would make sense. Way down at the bottom, I'll focus down there, is snow. That snow is here all year long, mainly because the lava is a good insulator apparently, and the sun can never quite get down inside there, so it can't actually heat it up, nor can it heat up the air enough, I suppose, to melt the snow completely, although I suspect it melts in the summer, but not at a very fast rate, so that each winter it's replenished. This walkway and the imaginative use of the steel posts and the airline cable gives an interesting contrasting modern look, but at the same time, and a very neat look, which contrasts with the rubble look of the natural lava terrain. Here we're looking down into another lava cone, or spatter cone rather. And it's interesting, if you look at the side, you can see some kind of outer layer, probably the last cooling layer of lava that flowed out, put a coating on the rocks beneath. And now, for whatever the reason, maybe the difference in the integrity, the construction of the rocks above and below, it's now flaking off, or exfoliation might be the term. What's particularly interesting, since this is a site that many people come to, is this bird's nest. It's not more than 30 feet from me. I'm looking straight at it and I can look down into it. Interesting. Those are people climbing up to that ridge to the right, and I'll go back so you can get some perspective. And now we're at normal view, and I'll just pan up. Get some sense of the height there. Now all around here you can see this rippling effect. It looks like a cord, but it's a rippling effect. My guess is that this is formed in the same way it would be formed if you took a almost cold but still flowing pot of molasses and just dumped it on the ground. From the point of contact, it will spread out, and this is what you will see. It spreads out in waves, if you will, from the center of impact, probably according to the density, maybe variations in the amount of lava that came out every couple of seconds or so. Here's a little bit more pronounced view of that rippling effect, although this would make you think that it came from my right, or maybe even from my right, the way it's curved in like this, if my theory is correct. This is a good example of the ruggedness that I was talking about, impassable by wagons and probably even by horses. Even if it were passable, you'd spend so much time picking your way through, it'd be very much like a maze. These are lava cascades, and by that I assume that must mean that they flow down from either a higher elevation or from a volcano that is the higher elevation. You can almost imagine, as you look at those curving, sinewy lines, that that's red hot, black on top, maybe red at the foot, maybe smoking. Because it is the same as that Pahoho in Hawaii, and referred to here by that name. And here you get an interesting view. Here there's no doubt what we're looking at. The sun is helping us to see it. And that is the flowing together of two lava flows. Beds, if you will, or river beds, if you will, rivers of lava in their beds. Obviously, it looked like they cut their way through an earlier lava mass. And notice there you get an idea of how the caves are created. Now, these are very thin sealing caves, but the idea remains the same. The top part cools off first, and the inner part keeps on flowing. You can almost see here where the lava must have flowed around something, because it's a little bit contorted. And up further there, another more substantial cave. Okay, now we're on the opposite side of the road, and you can see how the river of lava continued down through the earlier beds. Notice the ridges to the side there from earlier flows. And you can see here that the road is particularly cracked right in this area and breaking down. The curb is breaking down here. My guess is that that lava caves, if you will, or tubing, the air spaces underneath have broken down, causing that to give way and break the road. And if you look, we'll follow this down with the telephoto. We have less than a minute. And you can see that the elevation has dropped off significantly. But you can see the actual drop in the elevation. We're looking, I think, at what looks like the lowest spot, maybe 50, 100 feet beneath where we're at right now. This was the landmark, that mountain there. I'll talk till the thing turns off. That was the landmark, hazy now in the polluted air, that guided apparently the Oregon Trail people around this impassable lava terrain. Here we can see chunks of lava. My guess is that those are the tops of the tubes that are broken down over time. Just a guess. And look at the pretty vegetation sitting over there. I'm just killing time, but it's interesting to see this stuff. And then the great travel vehicle of all time. We're now traveling down the side of an old volcano, or at least some kind of a volcanic eruption of some sort. Duh. I've just hiked down along that edge of this old volcano en route to the tree molds. Okay, we're now at the tree mold area, but before we go down to look at those, this gives a good idea of the kind of topography a person would have to traverse if they wanted to go in a straight line from one side to the other side of of this lava. Somewhere between here and those mountains, of course, normal, smooth rolling topography returns, but this is what it would be, and we'll get closer up a little bit further on. But right now, let's go down and look at the tree molds. These are tree molds. There are at least 3 of them here, maybe a couple more somewhere. And they're formed when the lava flows around the tree. Then the moisture from the tree being precipitated by the, or vaporized, if you will, by the heat of the lava. The vapor that's in the trees then cools that lava quickly, forming this concavity. But then the tree, partially burned, remains, and then eventually, over 1,000 whatever years, erodes and weathers and rots away. All around me is this twisting and turning, smooth, rope-like movements, or evidence of the movements of the lava. So it looked like it would have flowed downhill, perhaps, from one of these directions, maybe several over time, and just encased these 3 trees that were here. But looking at the size of those trees, this might have been quite a good-sized forest. Approaching an area now that just kind of looks curious to me, because I think it's got some significant elevations, like places where the rivers of lava did not penetrate so thoroughly. Here, perfect example of that, bunching up of material as it does something, flows downhill or uphill. I'm not sure what the dynamic is. It could have been, this is certainly going downhill. Maybe what happens is as it flows downhill, it backs up against the lava in front of it and creates those concave rings, if you will. Certainly it can be from places like this that give you the impression of craters and the impression of the moon surface. Now here's some excellent examples of the tree molds. The tree had either fallen beforehand or was pushed down by the lava, and you can actually see the imprints of branches that went off to the side, those 2 holes there. You can see the bark indentations, and you can see that this might have been a tree with several branches that we're seeing here. And a fairly significant sized tree, about the size of the other one perhaps, if that curve is any indicator. Here, not too far away from it, more of the long line, just a little bit of bark indentation remaining from the weathering, and otherwise it's all been filled in. The upper part's been broken through over time. It might have been just a thin covering, and then when the tree itself rotted out over time, there was no support. It's always fascinating to me when you're here in a place like this and you're looking at something like this that may be 1,000, 2,000 years of age, to wonder, were there men here at that time? Men meaning humans? What did they think of this kind of event? What did they think of these tree molds? Did they know of their existence? And how high would these trees have been at the level? Now we're seeing these here. Was this the level of the ground? Presumably so, or at least it was the level of the top of the lava flow. But could the trees go deeper much, much deeper than what we're seeing here, based on the elevation drop right over there. Were I younger, one of the neat challenges would be to get permission to traverse this as a backpacker. Now this particular tree mold sits at its top roughly about 6 feet below the grade that I'm on, and then it goes down another 2 feet. Could one go down and excavate that out deeper and deeper and deeper? What kind of intrigues me is looking way up there on top of that hill in the distance, which is all eroded and smoothed off. If that was once a volcanic hill, and then material just kind of cascaded down and formed these lower hills, which are now covered with vegetation and now are basically eroded down except for a few outcroppings. And yet when we get down here, we find what almost looks like pristine lava flow. Why is this not eroded out? Why did the upper part not look like this? Is it the fact that this came down and flowed across the land horizontally, whereas on the hills there's been not only the downward flow, which would tend to smooth and take with it anything that was loose, but then the erosion capacity of, or capability of, gravity-driven water and debris off those hills might have smoothed those, whereas that's not happening here. I don't know. Now this area that I'm standing next to now was an entire lava tube, if you will. You can see what height it was at, and you can see along the edges there where it broke off and fell down into the rather shallow, flat lava tube. And the same thing is here. You can just see the broken and buckling chunks of rock. But you can also see cracks through here that may reflect that whole big chunks of this fell in on itself. You can just imagine this slowly flowing like molasses. Probably, I'm guessing now as I look at it more, the front waves, the back waves starting to pile up behind the front waves as the front waves encounter obstructions or whatever. Notice the metallic blue color. Here's another hole that to me looks very much like a tree hole, a mold, particularly if the tree were either slanted or it was near its base where it was curving up a bit. It's unmarked, but I suspect that's what it is. I always like to walk with the camera on. Your eyes, of course, adjust to the up and down movement of your body, and the camera doesn't, but gives people a little sense, gives me a little sense of what it was like to walk along the trail. This is the evening of a trip in August 12th, over to see Peter Reedy. Just trying to pick up some of the lovely ambience of this evening. And this is the splatter cones that I've shown before, this one and the one I just passed on the right there. And here we can look down into a splatter cone and see the snow and ice that remains. All of this was earlier in the video, but a different time of year. Last fall, almost a year ago, and a different time of day. There's always something, I don't know, very intimate, I guess is the only word I can think of, about being in these places at night alone. There's nobody out here right now. We're all back at the campground. But to me, this is one of the prettiest times to be here. Okay, so we're looking down that hook, if you will, which hooks off to the left around the butte that you see here, that hill right to our left. Right where that individual's hiking up. The light here, the sunlight just coming up, gives a nice view of the striations caused in this forward flow of the lava. This tree was initial evidence as to one guess at the age of this lava flow. The tree apparently is 1,350 years old, which is surprising. But in 1954, radioactive carbon-based and paleomagnetic dating methods indicate that the flow from this north crater was about 2,000 years ago. Much of what we see here is also what they call squeeze-ups. Sometimes the pressure beneath breaks the crust and lava from below runs out on top, a squeeze-up. And pressure ridges, and I think that's what we're standing on right now. You can see how this slope right in front of us lifts up. It's just the result of a new vent, a steeper slope, obstructions back it up, increased flow might cause it to happen. This little pan that I'll make shows the difference between a recent volcanic cone, which is this one in front of us, 2,000 years old. And then as I pan around and use the photo lens, we get over to this other hill nearby, which has foliage on it, as well as a pretty developed stand of conifer trees up there, and that's about 7,500 years. What's fascinating is the incredible sense of rubble of all this broken lava. You can see how even these ropey-looking buildups, as the lava pushed forward, has its own little micro tubes, if you will. Now this kind of smooth or ropey that we see right along the edge of the walkway here is the pahoho, or Hawaiian word, the smooth or ropey lava. But that which is beyond, the stuff I referred to as, or the lava I referred to as rough and rubble, is aha. It's a rough and jagged lava. And we'll see here in a moment probably some really dramatic examples of that. These big giant chunks of lava are actually chunks of the cinder cone or the crater's wall that were broken either by earthquakes or a huge powerful flow of lava, and it would have had this kind of look here. And then the lava just carried these big huge chunks down, which gives you also an idea of the power of lava, like the power of water to move. Now you wonder how plants like these would be able to grow in this kind of environment. And the lichen, which I think is a combination of two other entities, break down the rock directly with acids that they produce, and then they create a little bit of soil, but most of the soil is just blown in. Last night they were doing construction on the road up there, and the wind was really howling, and as trucks drove along you could see huge clouds of dust that they were creating. The wind can naturally do that on its own, and then those crevices fill in, and so they're the first places where the plants can grab a foothold, and you can see that that's where they are, obviously, is in the crevices. But you can see some lichen right there too. And here this wall of lichen, different colors, different textures to them. Perhaps if we landed on a planet the first time, when we first land on a new planet, new for us, that's one of the life forms we may hope to find is at least a lichen, or at least the fossilizations of lichen. This little patch is kind of interesting because it shows how the flows underneath the surface are. If you look at this one right here, we see the upper flow. right in this area here moving, and then we see it hook around like that. We see it encounter some kind of obstruction ahead, so it starts to back up on itself up there. But then if you look up into this area right up in here, here you see the direction going the same way like this on the surface, but down underneath it, it was being backed up so that you get the striations going like this. Just kind of interesting. This is another huge lichen covered but eroding, that's what the dark portion is, chunk of crater wall that was pushed down here. This little guy is just in the spot where there's a little bit of dirt forming right on top of the rock, but trapped by the two rocks around it, just enough for it to get a purchase. This is Idaho City on Route 21, east of Boise, going north. This is just a funky building at the end of the main street in Centerville Road, which is the center of the historic area of town. This is a funky old building.